My fingers kept twisting that damn ring around and around. 10 years. It felt like a lifetime and a blink all at once. Michael and I, we'd done the whole thing. College sweethearts, got married, bought the big house. But lately, it was like something was missing. Like we were sleepwalking, not really living. The spark had fizzled out years ago, replaced by this comfortable routine. I'd stare at my reflection in the mirror and see a stranger. Someone who'd settled for good enough instead of chasing what she deserved. Dinner got weird that night. The silence stretched out between us, so thick I could almost touch it. I finally just blurted it out, Michael. I think we need a break. Like, 3 weeks apart. See how it feels. He was quiet for a long second. Then he did this half-nod thing like he'd been expecting it. Or maybe wanting it. A little spark of something flickered behind his eyes, gone before I could be sure. But it niggled at me. Was it relief? Guilt? I couldn't tell. I packed light. Couldn't stand the emptiness of that big house anymore. Took me 2 trips to get my stuff into this cramped little apartment, but it was my space now, not ours. That was weird to think about. We'd shared everything for so long. I didn't know who I was on my own anymore. The first few nights were awful. Too quiet. I know people say they love being alone, but I guess I didn't. Not really. Made me think about all the stuff I'd been pushing down, all the not quite right moments with Michael. His disinterest, that way he'd always seem a little distracted. I'd convinced myself it was just stress, just life, but now. Then the phone rang. Didn't recognize the number. First time I ignored it. Then it rang again and again. Finally, I just picked up, ready to tell whoever it was to get lost. And this woman's voice, all panicky and sorry, goes, "I'm sleeping with your husband." Oh God, I'm so sorry. The world just stopped. Emily, that was her name. A coworker. I always thought Michael was a bit too friendly with her, but cheating? With her? It didn't make sense. He wasn't that kind of guy, was he? But that feeling in my gut, it was screaming at me. Once you start looking, you can't stop. Phone bills, credit card receipts, all those, late nights at work. That sick feeling in my gut told me it was all adding up. I had to know for sure. I couldn't live with the not knowing anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I just kept staring at the ceiling, thinking about Emily and her stupid, apologetic voice. I felt sick. Sick and stupid. Was it true? Had Michael really been? I didn't want to say the word. Cheating. It sounded so dirty, so cheap. And Michael? Well, he wasn't like that. Was he? I mean, we had problems, sure, but he'd never outright lie to me. But then, was I lying to myself? I started remembering all those times he'd come home smelling like her perfume, the way he'd flinch when I joked about him having a crush on her. I was an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. The next morning, I started digging. Like, really digging. I went through Michael's phone records, his old social media accounts, anything I could find. Those, late nights at work, suddenly lined up with fancy dinner receipts, hotel charges in the city, even a florist bill dated the day before Emily's birthday. When I found the jewelry store receipt, it hit me like a punch to the gut. It was expensive, a delicate necklace he'd never buy me in a million years. It was the kind of gift you give to a mistress, not a wife. My hands were shaking so hard. I could barely hold the damn paper. I spent the next few days going through everything, finding more and more evidence. Michael was thorough, let me tell you. He used private browsing windows, deleted emails, all of it. But I was starting to get pretty good at picking up on the trail. He wasn't as clever as he thought. Each new piece I found was like a knife twisting in my gut. It was one thing to suspect something, but another to see the cold, hard proof spelled out in front of you. The worst part was he acted completely normal, making me coffee in the mornings, asking about my day, like he wasn't leading this whole double life behind my back. Every time I looked at him, I wanted to scream. Instead, I just smiled back, and I swore I'd make him pay. I needed to know if I was imagining things. So, the next day, I told Michael the first was getting my hair done and drove straight to that damn jewelry store. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. It was a fancy place, the kind I never go to. The saleswoman gave me this weird look, probably recognizing the type. Desperate wife sniffing out a cheating husband. I didn't even care. With a trembling voice, I described the necklace and gave her a vague idea of when he might have bought it. The way her eyes widened confirmed everything. "Oh yes," she said, chirpy enough to make me want to hurl. He was a very devoted customer. So there it was, proof in the condescending smile of a total stranger. Michael, devoted to another woman. I left the store feeling physically sick. All this time, I had been so oblivious. It wasn't just some fling, this was serious. 2 lives, 2 sets of lies. The clarity that was supposed to come with this stupid break turned into a blazing rage. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Mousy brown hair, tired eyes, 10 years of playing the good little wife. It stopped right then. The next morning, I booked the most expensive salon, asking for the craziest color they had. Fire engine red, the lady told me, and somehow I knew it was perfect. After that, something in me snapped. I started getting organized. Not housework organized, but like revenge organized. Photos of Michael leaving hotels with Emily, screenshots of the bank account I was sure he thought I didn't know existed. Everything was evidence. Then, I found her, the lawyer. Hard as nails with a name whispered in circles of angry ex-wives. Her price tag made my eyes water. But this wasn't about being sensible anymore. We met, and I laid it all out. The affair, the hidden money, everything. Her eyes practically gleamed. "Oh, we can bury him," she purred. It sounded so sweet. I also started talking to Emily again. Played dumb at first, just a worried wife trying to understand. She was eaten up by guilt, so I played into it. Soon enough, she was spilling details I could use. Dates, fancy dinners, the works. It was disgusting, but it felt good to take control. Then came the burner phone. Short, nasty messages to Michael, just enough to make him wonder who knew. At first, it was subtle, but they got worse. His face started turning gray, always checking his phone like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The best part was, he couldn't figure out who was doing it. He was unraveling, and I was the one pulling the strings. The next strike came at that stuffy company party Michael dragged me to every year. All smiles and suits and lies. That night, when he wasn't paying attention, I slipped my burner phone into his pocket and switched hours. Easy as pie. Then, I started texting. Nasty little messages about Emily, details of hotel escapades, even a fake bank statement. All the proof of his double life sent straight to his precious phone. Right there in the heart of his professional world. Let me tell you, the meltdown was spectacular. He went white as a ghost, fumbling with the phone. Clients, big shots in his industry, were looking at him like he had 3 heads. Emily was there, too, face pale. Slowly, it dawned on her. I played her like a fiddle. The look she gave me was pure venom, but I didn't even care. By the time he finally figured out it was my phone, the damage was done. His career was cracking open, everyone whispering and staring. Michael was unraveling in front of the very people he'd spent his whole life trying to impress. That night was the beginning of the end for him. Taking another break would have been a messy situation, so I decided not to waste a moment. While Michael was out trying to do damage control, I went home and turned into a packing machine. His suits, his fancy watches, everything went into the cheap suitcases he always teased me about using. His bags were waiting at the door by the time he got back, face flushed and defeated. I didn't say a word, just watched him process it all. He opened his mouth, probably to apologize or try that charm he thought always worked. Instead, I pulled out the divorce papers, my lawyer's name glaring up at him, and told him to sign. The fight was gone from him. He knew his life as he knew it was over. Of course, he came crawling back a few days later, desperate and pathetic. "What happened to you?" He whimpered. "You've changed." That's when I told him everything. Every lie, every hotel room, every dollar he stole to play house with Emily. His face crumpled as I laid it out, calm and cold as ice. When I finished, he looked like I'd slapped him. "Sarah, please," he begged, but I was done. He was a stranger, just a cheap liar who had fooled me for too long. The only thing I felt was the bitter satisfaction of revenge. I smiled at him, and the chill in it must have finally broken through to him. He got up and left, and I never saw him again. News travels fast, especially the juicy kind. A week after the party disaster, a story went live on some trashy gossip website. Details about Michael and Emily, complete with photos I may or may not have accidentally leaked to the right person. His name was smeared. He went from respected businessman to laughing stock, a pathetic punchline overnight. His company was done with him. The morals clause in his contract was enough to boot him without a second thought. His downfall was news, just not the kind he used to make. Of course, I had to see how he was holding up. So, I picked a swanky restaurant I knew he liked and, accidentally, bumped into him and Emily. I played the part well, heartbroken wife who couldn't believe what a fool she'd been. Until there was a flicker of recognition in Emily's eyes. Then it was game over. I let the mask drop, just for a second, my smile turning venomous. Emily flinched. Michael knew, right then, I was behind his whole world crumbling. But I wasn't even close to done. The burner phone went back to work. Michael's mom got pictures from their romantic getaways. Old college buddies got screenshots of texts where he badmouthed them to Emily. Suddenly everyone he'd ever known saw him for what he was. A selfish, lying cheat. He became the town pariah. Then came the dating. Oh, it was fun. I downloaded all the apps, went on blind dates, anything to be seen. And not just dates, but good dates. Successful guys, cute guys, guys who made Michael look like greasy troll in comparison. Word gets around a small town like ours, and I made sure he heard every detail. The icing on the cake was Marcus. Remember him? College crush, now all grown up and running for office. We bumped into each other at the grocery store, totally planned, of course. One coffee date turned into dinner. Turns out local politics was a small world. Everyone Michael desperately needed for a comeback was suddenly in Marcus's corner. The rage that had been fueling me was slowly turning into something else. Satisfaction? Sure. But also a kind of freedom I'd never felt before. I was building something new just for myself, and Michael, the architect of his own ruin, could do nothing but watch. The hits kept coming. Word of the affair. The real story, not Michael's watered-down apologies, reached his old clients. Suddenly, his contacts went silent, deals fizzled out. I even got a call from one of his investors. The guy was furious. He lost a boatload of money thanks to Michael's Lil scandal. That was the final nail in the coffin of his career. But I had one more nasty little trick up my sleeve. I made a hefty donation to the local women's shelter, under Emily's name. Then I made darn sure Michael saw the thank you card they sent her. Seeing her name associated with supporting victims of exactly the thing they'd done, it felt almost too good. Then it was my turn to shine. Those same conferences Michael used to schmooze at? I started showing up, dressed to the nines, charming anyone who would listen. All his old contacts, I made sure to reconnect with. When Michael caught wind, seeing me thriving in the world he'd lost, his eyes went dead. While I was networking, he was scrambling for any job he could get. But, funny thing, people kept turning him away. Turns out a little well-timed rumor about how unreliable Michael was, and even potential employers wanted nothing to do with him. Then he tried the big apology. Newspaper articles, sob stories about being a changed man. It would have been pathetic if it wasn't so predictable. The very next day, my side of the story was splashed across the headlines. The truth about his lies, his manipulation, his changed man act lasted about 2 seconds before the public saw right through him. The worst part for him was the whispers. Everywhere he went, people knew. Not just about Emily, but other rumors too. Multiple affairs, flings with secretaries, all stuff I might have, accidentally, suggested to a few bored gossips. Michael, the respected businessman, was now Michael, the town sleazebag. I heard he was looking at jobs in other cities, maybe even other states. Good riddance, I thought. The further he fell, the better I felt. He'd taken my whole life, twisted it up until I didn't know who I was anymore. Getting it back meant watching him lose absolutely everything. I wasn't done yet. See, there were those secret little bank accounts I'd sniffed out, the ones he'd used to fund his fancy little life with Emily. Stashing cash overseas? It screamed tax evasion. I didn't know exactly how taxes worked, but the IRS did. A few well-placed anonymous tips, and Michael suddenly found himself in a different kind of mess than the one I initially made. Tax guys? They play for keeps. News got out that he was being investigated, facing possible charges. Jail time. It was the final nail in his coffin. He was already unemployable. Now he was untouchable. Investors weren't just angry, they were out for blood. Turns out, he owed people a lot of money. He tried one last time, showed up at my door, looking 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him, begged for my forgiveness, said he'd do anything. It was pathetic, honestly. But I had one final trick left to play. He didn't know I'd set my phone to record the second he stepped through the door. His sobs, his begging, his promises, and, best of all, the admissions. Every detail of the affair, the siphon money, the lies he told everyone. Bad recording? It wasn't just for me. I sent it to every local paper, every blogger, every single person in that town who thought they knew Michael. The great, charming businessman was revealed to be a blubbering, deceitful mess. I heard he vanished a few weeks later. New name, new town, maybe even a new country. I didn't care. His life here, the one he built on my back, obliterated. He was a ghost now, a cautionary tale whispered over glasses of wine by women a little smarter and a whole lot angrier than the woman he'd betrayed. And me? Well, I sold that big, empty house, and with the money, well, let's just say a girl deserves a vacation after she takes down her own personal empire of lies. Let me know if you'd like a chapter exploring Sarah's newfound freedom. A year. It went fast at first, a blur of selling that big, empty house and booking plane tickets to places I'd only seen on postcards. Then time seemed to slow down, each day a little victory lap. I kept busy, beaches, museums, even learned how to scuba dive. Being alone wasn't so bad, turned out. I donated a chunk of the money from the house sale to that women's shelter, under my maiden name. A final middle finger to Michael, and a way to erase a little more of him from my life. Travel did me good. It wasn't just the sights, but the people you meet along the way. People who don't know you, don't care about your old, tired baggage. With strangers, I could be whoever I wanted. Funny, adventurous, the Sarah I'd always wanted to be but never had the chance to discover. Then, a few weeks back, I got news. Michael was working some dead-end job in a backwater town, hiding out. People still recognized him, of course, but now he was the joke, not some respected businessman. Funny, I didn't feel that thrill of victory I expected. It was more like nothing. Like winning a game you suddenly didn't want to play anymore. Maybe that's why I agreed to go to that stupid fundraiser when I got back. All dressed up in a gown I never would have worn before, hair and makeup done by someone who didn't look at me with pity. Hell, I almost didn't recognize myself. Then, across the room, I saw him. Not Michael, but another man. Handsome, sure, but it wasn't that. His eyes were kind, not calculating like Michael's. He smiled and this new Sarah who was still learning who she was, smiled back. We talked for hours. Turns out, he was funny, smart, interesting. Everything Michael never was. His name was Ben. When I introduced myself, it was with my maiden name. A fresh start, a clean slate. He asked if I would like to have coffee sometime. And the weirdest thing was, I wanted to. Not because I was searching for love, or even because I liked him that much yet. It was because, for the first time in forever, I felt like I had a choice. Michael had taken all my choices away for so long. Now, I got to decide. The moment we decided to pack up our lives and move back to Michigan, it felt like we were embarking on an adventure, a fresh start closer to my roots. That excitement died real quick, let me tell you. Living out of that cramped camper, it was supposed to be a temporary thing. But every day in that tiny space felt like a reminder of how far apart we drifted. I was craving connection, something real, but all I got was the cold shoulder and the silent treatment. Then, out of nowhere, it seemed like we struck gold. We found this house, our supposed dream home. For a hot minute, it felt like we were onto something good, something solid. But as the newness faded, so did my spirits. That house, as beautiful as it was, became my prison. I was itching for an escape, any escape. Weekends became my lifeline. I'd tell him I was spending time with my cousins, soaking up family vibes. But if I'm being totally honest, it was more about getting away from him and our so-called life together. It wasn't long before he caught on, though. The confrontation was inevitable. He cornered me one evening, his frustration boiling over. Where does this end? Huh? Every weekend. It's like you're living a whole other life. His words, they felt like shackles, trying to tie me down. I snapped back, all guns blazing, fighting for that sliver of freedom I'd tasted. Our talks, if you can even call them that, turned into full-blown wars. Every attempt to communicate just ended up in more heartache, more distance between us. I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped, suffocating under the weight of failed expectations. Filing for divorce felt like ripping off a band-aid. It hurt like hell, but it was also a relief. We shifted into this awkward phase of being roommates, passing ships in the night, all for the sake of our kids. There was this bizarre sense of freedom in acknowledging our failure, a twisted kind of peace in accepting the end. But then, out of the blue, we thought, why not give it one more shot? There was this brief glimmer of hope, like maybe, just maybe, we could patch things up. We started talking, really talking, and it felt like we were getting somewhere. But deep down, I knew. I knew that we were just slapping a band-aid on the gushing wound. No amount of trying seemed to get to the root of our problems. So there I was, stuck in this loop of wanting to make things work and craving my freedom. It was like being caught between a rock and a hard place, with no clear way out. Every step forward with him felt like 2 steps back in my own head. And that's where I found myself, tangled up in a mess of my own making, wondering how the hell I was supposed to untangle it. The vacation was supposed to glue us back together, you know? Like a band-aid on a bullet hole. But there I was, staring out the car window, feeling the distance between us grow with every mile. My husband, trying to bridge the gap, kept making small talk, but my responses were as empty as the passing fields. Back home, the silence grew. I found myself diving deeper into my phone, scrolling through social media and gaming apps, looking for, I don't even know what, a distraction. Maybe? A connection that felt missing in my real life. My online world became my sanctuary, a place where I could be whoever I wanted without judgment. Then came the surgery, gastric bypass. A decision I made for myself, to feel better, to start anew. But recovery was tough, tougher than I anticipated. It wasn't just the physical healing, it was the emotional turmoil that caught me off guard. I was vulnerable in ways I hadn't expected, questioning everything about my life, my choices, my identity. That's when I met Alex online. We clicked over shared interests and endless conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Alex got me, understood the chaos in my head when I was still trying to make sense of it myself. It was exhilarating, feeling understood on such a deep level, and terrifying at the same time because I knew what it might lead to. Deciding to meet Alex in person was like stepping off a cliff blindfolded. I told myself it was just to solidify a friendship, but who was I kidding? There was an underlying current there, a pull that was more than platonic, and I was too curious, too starved for that connection, to resist. The weekend with Alex was a blur of emotions, laughter, and revelations. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was completely myself. No holding back, no pretending. It was freeing and utterly terrifying. I hadn't planned to cross lines, but lines were definitely crossed. By the time I left, my heart was in turmoil, filled with guilt and an undeniable excitement for something new, something that felt right in a way nothing had for a long time. Coming home was like stepping into another world. One look at my husband, and the guilt hit me like a wave. The hickeys on my neck burned like a brand, a mark of my betrayal. I couldn't hide them, didn't even try. The confrontation was inevitable. He asked without asking. His eyes filled with a hurt that cut me deeper than I thought possible. And I confessed. Everything poured out in a rush, the meeting, the feelings, the undeniable connection I had with Alex. I watched his face crumble, watched the life we'd built together fracture in an instant. The aftermath was a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, hurt. It was all there, in his eyes, in the tension that filled our home. I had broken us, shattered our family with my selfishness. The realization was a weight I wasn't prepared to carry, but there was no going back. The path I had chosen was laid out before me, and all I could do was move forward, into the unknown, carrying the burden of my choices. Right off the bat, Let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the aftermath of confessing your biggest mistake. The moment I told my husband about the affair, it felt like the world stopped spinning. My words hung in the air, heavy with guilt and an odd sense of defiance. I'm sorry, I said, staring into his shocked eyes, but this is about my happiness too. It sounded selfish even to my own ears, but it was my truth, raw and unfiltered. His reaction was a gut punch. The look of betrayal, the hurt that clouded his face, it mirrored the chaos inside me. How could you? He whispered, the pain in his voice slicing through me. And just like that, our kitchen, once the heart of our home, turned into a cold courtroom where every word I said felt like another charge against me. The days that followed were a blur of heated arguments and tearful accusations. Our conversations were a messy tangle of emotions, a relentless tug of war between blame and understanding. I thought we were fixing us, he'd say, voice cracking, and all I could muster was, I thought so too, but I was just lost. It was a dance of despair, one step forward, two steps back, as we tried to navigate through the wreckage of our marriage. In a moment of desperation, I pleaded for his support. Can't we just support each other through this? For the kids? I asked, hoping for a shred of the partnership we once had. His silence was answer enough, a clear sign of how far we'd strayed from each other. Deciding to go through with the divorce felt like signing a pact with the devil. It was a choice laced with pain and promise, a step towards a future that was as daunting as was necessary. I knew it meant tearing our family apart, but part of me yearned for the freedom it promised, a chance to explore this new version of myself that I couldn't ignore. The backlash was swift and brutal. Our families, once our biggest supporters, became our harshest critics. Phone calls turned into battlegrounds, with disappointed parents and bewildered siblings on the other end, unable to grasp how we got to this point. You're throwing everything away, my mother-in-law cried, her words a heavy weight on my already burdened conscience. Amidst the storm of judgment and anger, I found myself clinging to the faint hope that this upheaval would lead to some semblance of happiness. It was a gamble, betting on the unknown over the familiar misery that had become my life. But as I stood on the precipice of this new beginning, I couldn't help but wonder if the price of my happiness was too high, if the quest for self-fulfillment was worth the collateral damage it caused. Navigating the fallout was like walking through a minefield, every step fraught with potential disaster. Conversations with my husband became strategic negotiations, each of us trying to salvage what we could for the sake of our children. While our families looked on in dismay, their disappointment a constant reminder of the failure they believed we embodied. In the end, the decision to end our marriage wasn't just about leaving my husband. It was about confronting the reality of who I had become and who I wanted to be. It was a journey marked by pain, discovery, and the daunting task of rebuilding from the ashes of our shared past. As I faced the uncertain road ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, one that was entirely mine to write. Entangling our lives was like pulling at threads that refused to break. Every document signed, every picture taken down, felt like erasing a part of who we were together. This is harder than I thought, I muttered to myself, sifting through years of accumulated life, each item a testament to a shared past now splintering at the seams. The weight of my decisions pressed down on me, a heavy cloak of regret and what-ifs. I could see the toll it took on everyone around us, especially the kids. Their confused faces haunted me, a constant reminder of the irreversible damage my pursuit of happiness had caused. Are you okay, Mommy? They'd ask, their innocence making the burden even heavier. My husband's silence was perhaps the most deafening. Gone were the arguments, the heated exchanges that marked our last months together. Now, there was only resignation, a quiet acceptance that spoke volumes of the pain we both felt. I just want you to be happy, he said one day, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. That sentence echoed in the spaces of our home, a stark contrast to the life we once filled it with. Signing the divorce papers felt like etching our failures into stone, a permanent mark of an era ending. The finality of it all was overwhelming. So, this is it, I said, handing him the last of the paperwork. Our hands brushed briefly, a tactile goodbye to a relationship that had weathered storms only to sink in calm waters. Packing up my life into boxes, I stumbled upon relics of our happier times. A photo from our first vacation together, the kids' baby clothes, a random note he'd left me years ago. Each item was a piece of a puzzle we'd no longer complete. I packed them away, burying the memories beneath layers of bubble wrap, each pop a tiny echo of my heart fracturing. The last night in our home was surreal. The silence was a living entity, filling the rooms with the ghosts of laughter and love that once dwelled there. I wandered from room to room, touching walls, flicking switches, imprinting the feel of the house into my memory. Goodbye, I whispered into the emptiness, a farewell to more than just a physical space. Leaving was anticlimactic. I expected tears, dramatic farewells, but there was only the soft closing of the door, the click of the lock sealing away a chapter of my life. My husband stood in the doorway, a figure framed in the threshold of our past and my uncertain future. "Take care," he said, and I nodded, unable to trust my voice. The drive away was a mix of relief and dread. The open road before me symbolized freedom, but also the unknown. I glanced in the rearview mirror, the house receding into the distance, a symbol of all I was leaving behind. The road stretched out, a blank canvas, and I realized that this journey was not just about moving to a new place, but about finding who I was in the space between who I had been and who I wanted to become. Diving headfirst into this new chapter of my life felt like jumping off a cliff blindfolded. The realization that my choices had irreversibly altered the course of not just my life, but also those of my kids and ex-husband was a sobering thought that gnawed at me during the quiet nights. What have I done? Wasn't just a rhetorical question anymore. It was a heavy stone in my stomach, a constant reminder of the ripples caused by my actions. Meeting my new partner for the first time was surreal. There was this mix of excitement and fear, a cocktail of emotions that left me dizzy. "Are we really doing this?" I asked, half expecting them to bail on this complicated mess that was my life. But their reassuring smile was all the answer I needed. We were in this together, for better or worse. But merging our lives wasn't the romantic adventure I'd imagined. It was hard, way harder than I expected. Everything from deciding whose couch to keep to navigating our blended family dynamics felt like navigating a minefield. "Why can't this just be easy?" I muttered one evening, frustration bubbling over as we tried to blend not just our belongings but our lives, values, and routines. Our community's reaction was a bucket of cold water thrown on the fiery dream of starting anew. Whispers, stares, and outright hostility greeted us at every turn. I thought we left high school behavior behind. I joked weakly, trying to brush off the snide remarks at the grocery store. But deep down, each word stung. Each glare was a reminder of the price of our happiness. The hardest hit, though, was my relationship with my children. Trying to maintain our bond amidst the chaos felt like holding on to sand. The harder I tried, the quicker it seemed to slip through my fingers. "Mommy, why does everyone look at us funny?" my youngest asked one day, and my heart broke a little more. How do you explain to your child that the path to finding yourself can sometimes lead you through thorns? The high cost of my self-discovery journey was a bitter pill, indeed. It was a lonely road, paved with loss and regret. Was it worth it? Became a question I asked myself daily, usually in the dead of night when the world was silent and I couldn't drown out my thoughts with busyness. Seeing my ex-husband for the first time after everything went down was like walking into a storm. Our conversation was cautious, a delicate dance around the many elephants in the room. "We need to figure out how to co-parent in this mess," he said, his voice strained but calm. It was a stark contrast to the fiery arguments of our past, a reminder of everything we'd lost in our quest for personal happiness. Trying to establish a new normal for our kids was like assembling a puzzle without the picture on the box. Every day brought a new challenge, from explaining our new family dynamics to dealing with their emotions and questions. "We're still a family, just a different kind," I explained, hoping to ease their confusion and pain. The first holiday apart was a stark reminder of the life we once shared. Memories of laughter, love, and unity contrasted sharply with our current reality, making the holiday season more a time of mourning than of celebration. I miss how things used to be, my oldest confessed one night, and his words echoed my own hidden feelings. Navigating this new world, I was constantly reminded of the price of my decisions. The joy of discovering myself and pursuing happiness was tempered by the realization of the pain it caused. As I forged ahead, trying to blend our lives and heal the wounds, I couldn't help but wonder if the destination would be worth the tumultuous journey. Just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, life threw me a lifeline, or so it seemed. A few family members, seeing the turmoil and backlash, started reaching out. "We may not understand your choices, but we're still family," my aunt said one afternoon, her call a ray of light in the darkness. It wasn't a full embrace, but that sliver of acceptance felt like a breath of fresh air. Maybe not all was lost. Amidst the chaos, I found solace in new hobbies and interests, activities that had nothing to do with the woman I once was. Photography became my escape, capturing moments of beauty in a world that felt increasingly ugly. "Look at this shot," I'd say to my new partner, showing them a photo of a sunrise that seemed to symbolize a new beginning. It was a way to keep the darkness at bay, to remind myself that there was still beauty in the world. Our first public outing as a couple felt like stepping into a battlefield. We knew the whispers and stares were coming, but we held our heads high. "Let them look," my partner whispered, squeezing my hand as we walked through the park, defiance fueling our steps. It was a statement, loud and clear. We were here, we were together, and we wouldn't be shamed into hiding. But the backlash wasn't just in the real world. Social media became a cesspool of judgment and hatred. Anonymous comments on my posts were like daggers, each one a reminder of the judgment we faced. "You should be ashamed," one read, and even though I tried to brush them off, they left marks that were hard to ignore. Then came the first legal challenge related to our children. My ex-husband, pushed by his family's disapproval, filed for full custody, citing my instability. Sitting in that cold courtroom, listening to the case being made against me, was one of the lowest points of my life. "This isn't about us. It's about what's best for the kids," he said outside the courtroom, but all I could hear was the sound.
Sometimes you will find out that your partner cheated on you from an unlikely source. Most of the time, women stick together and they don't snitch, but that didn't happen in this case. For non-glorious years, my wife Samantha and I were a loving couple. I thought anyway. We lived in the sunny landscapes of California, renting houses in various spots along the coast to satisfy our adventurous spirits. Life was good. We surfed in the mornings, hiked in the afternoons, and spent our evenings cooking elaborate meals together. Our social circle consisted of fellow thrill seekers, many of whom were couples that Samantha had known since high school. Her best friend, Mandy, and Mandy's husband, Ryan, were fixtures in our lives. The four of us were inseparable, taking weekend trips to Napa Valley, road trips up the Pacific Coast Highway, and camping excursions in Joshua Tree. I considered Ryan like a brother. We watched football together, talked business ideas, and confided in each other about our relationships. My whole world came crashing down when an anonymous letter arrived in the mail addressed to me. The letter was from Mandy. The content was concise, but soul-shattering. "Samantha has cheated on you 4 times. Each incident happened during her so-called girls' nights out." My hands shook as the room started spinning. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself, the letter falling to the floor. Samantha had always been adamant that our girls' nights were innocent fun, Monty Python, gossiping and dancing. No men allowed. I searched my memory for any red flags, any signs that something more may have happened. Coming up empty, my mind raced with questions. When did this happen? Where did they go? Who told Mandy? And why did she wait until now to tell me? I knew confronting Samantha would be useless. She would adamantly deny everything. I needed more information. I picked up my phone and texted Mandy, "We need to talk ASAP." Within a minute, she responded, "Ryan's out of town until Friday. Come by the house tonight at 7. Mandy had also informed Ryan that I was coming over. This was really happening. Looking at the clock, I had a few hours until I needed to meet Mandy. I decided to go see my colleague, Steve, and get his advice on the situation. Steve and I worked together a few years back, and he was one of the most level-headed people I knew. I met Steve at a coffee shop down the street from his house. As I relayed the bombshell news, Steve listened intently. You need to talk to Mandy and get the full story before you do anything else. But ultimately, you have got to look out for yourself. Your next steps depend on what Samantha did. Steve's advice echoed in my mind. I left the coffee shop and went for a long drive to clear my head before meeting Mandy. At 7 p.m. sharp, I knocked on Mandy's front door. As she let me in, her eyes were brimming with tears. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table as she detailed the painful revelations 4 times over the past 18 months. Samantha had lied about going out with the girls. She actually went to meet other couples at house parties where many were openly cheating on their partners. Mandy found out when she overheard Samantha on the phone with someone organizing another hookup. Demanding answers, Samantha broke down and admitted everything to Mandy. She swore she didn't have actual sex with anyone, but the deception and betrayal stung sharply. Samantha begged Mandy to keep it a secret, insisting it would never happen again. For months, Mandy reluctantly stayed silent, but the guilt ate away at her, and she knew if the roles were reversed, she'd want the truth, so she sent a letter. "I'm so sorry," Mandy said, tears streaming down her face. "I never thought Samantha was capable of this." I sat in stunned silence, grasping the edges of my now broken reality. Samantha had meticulously lied to me over and over. Entire nights of my life were a fabrication. I felt sick to my stomach as I imagined her flirting at house parties, enjoying the ego boost of other men desiring her. Mandy reached out and squeezed my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you." I thanked her for having the courage to tell me the truth, even when it hurt. Driving home, I processed the ramifications of what Samantha did. According to California law, infidelity cannot be used as leverage in divorce proceedings. So even if Mandy was to testify in court on my behalf, it would be useless. Did I want to salvage this marriage? Could I ever trust Samantha again? I decided I needed legal counsel to understand all my options. The next morning, I scheduled a consultation with Allison, a seasoned divorce attorney recommended by Steve. "You have two options," Allison explained. "You can either confront your wife when she returns, or see if there's any hope left for the marriage. Many couples do manage to heal after an affair with counseling, but it takes tremendous work and commitment on both sides, or you can discreetly initiate separation. Start untangling your finances. Find a new place to live and have her served with divorce papers. That route obviously provides a clean break." I wasn't ready to make any definite moves yet, so Allison summarized the key logistical steps if I decided on divorce. Over the next few days, my thoughts hovered between utter heartbreak and boiling anger. One minute, I collapsed on the couch in tears. The next, I was throwing tennis balls angrily against the garage door. By Friday, my dominant sentiment was indignation at Samantha for betraying me, and at myself for being so oblivious. I decided right then that I was leaving her. Steve's wise words echoed in my mind. You got to look out for yourself for once. I needed to put my own well-being first. I texted Steve explaining my decision. Always pragmatic. He said, "Let me know how I can help." I asked if I could rent his vacant apartment for a few months while I figured out the next steps. "Of course, it's all yours." Steve immediately responded. When Samantha's car pulled into the driveway Friday night, I was sitting on the front porch steps waiting for her. I watched her face transform from cheerful to crestfallen as she registered the suitcase at my feet. "We need to talk. I have something to show you first." Before she could conjure any excuses, I withdrew Mandy's letter from my pocket and held it up. Samantha's face contorted in shock. "How could Mandy do this to me?" she shrieked. "You're going to believe something from Mandy over your own wife. She's a miserable, bored housewife who lives through my drama." I shook my head in disbelief at her audacity to make Mandy the villain. "Save it, Samantha. The jig is up. I know about the house parties. I know about you meeting with other couples and other men. I know about everything." Samantha's eyes darted around frantically as she grabs for plausible denials. Of course there was no sly way out. Mandy had already come clean with the whole dirty truth. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "You have to believe me. Nothing physical ever happened. It was just stupid thrill-seeking. It was an invitation-only scene, had house parties with hot singles and open-minded couples. It was a total farce." I listened, stone-faced, unable to muster any sympathy. "The lying is just as bad as the cheating, Samantha. For over a year, you've been living a double life behind my back. We're done." Samantha pleaded tearfully for a second chance, but my mind was made up. I carried my suitcase to the car, ignoring her frantic questions about where I was going. As I backed out of the driveway, she ran alongside my car, sobbing and begging me not to leave. My heart ached, seeing her so distraught, but I maintained my composure and drove off. She brought this on herself. For me, the only way forward was out. I moved into Steve's fully furnished apartment that night. He came over and helped me bring my things up from the car. Settling onto the couch with a beer, I finally let the emotions of the day spill out. Steve listened quietly. I was beyond grateful to have such a true friend. By morning, the events of the last week felt like a bad dream. In some ways, it was a relief to have the truth exposed instead of lurking silently. But my sense of betrayal still stung sharply. Samantha had been my whole world for nearly a decade. Blowing up that world left me feeling rudderless. I distracted myself with the logistics of getting settled in the apartment. I contacted the bank to remove Samantha from my accounts and revoked her authorized user status on my credit cards. Next, I emailed my boss, explaining I was dealing with an unexpected life change and needed to work remotely for a bit. Luckily, my job in tech allowed that flexibility. I spent the next few days working from my couch, grateful for the productive distraction. By Wednesday, word had spread among our wider social circle about the implosion of my marriage. My mom and sister called to check on me, both offering their unconditional support. They were as shocked and disappointed as I was about Samantha's duplicity. Later that day, I met my dad for lunch at a quiet bistro. I braced myself for the "I told you" speech, since my dad never quite trusted Samantha's adventurous, free-spirited nature, but he was sensitive and sympathetic as I confided the painful details. He agreed to keep it quiet from my mom for now. She had always adored Samantha, and the revelation would devastate her. I decided to take control of the narrative before Samantha could twist the story against me. That night, I posted a video on Facebook Live, knowing many of our friends would be watching. I'm here to set the record straight. Many of you are probably wondering why Samantha and I have gone our separate ways. Well, the truth is she was living a double life, attending house parties with married couples. All the while, she was claiming she was just doing girls' night out. I went on to explain Samantha's web of lies and betrayal over the past 18 months. Even a few of Samantha's childhood friends messaged me privately to apologize for her behavior. They were shocked and angry on my behalf. The emotional relief I felt at blowing Samantha's secret wide open was comforting. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts. Childhood buddies, former colleagues, cousins I hadn't talked to in years, all reaching out to check in. I awoke the next morning to an avalanche of missed calls and voicemails from Samantha. Her tone cycled through rage, disbelief, and pleading. I silenced my phone and focused on returning messages from people I actually wanted to talk to. My inbox was also flooded with emails containing links and screenshots. Facebook Live had gone viral within the California surf community. People were reposting it everywhere in solidarity with me. Samantha was being painted as the villain, which felt justified after her years of lies. 2 months after I left Samantha, an official-looking envelope arrived at Steve's apartment. I ripped it open to find divorce papers from Samantha's attorney. Even though I was expecting it, the finality of seeing it in writing hit me hard. Samantha was petitioning for an even split of assets and debts accrued during our marriage. She also wanted me to assume the lease on the BMW she drove. Since it wasn't my name, fair enough. I just wanted closure. The next few weeks were consumed with legal proceedings, document sightings, affidavits, negotiations between attorneys. In the end, the process went as amicable as possible, given the circumstances. I kept the house we owned in Big Sur. Samantha kept the BMW. I told her and the attorney I would give her a year to refinance the BMW in her name. They both agreed. Our savings were divided down the middle. On paper, it was a clean split. Emotionally, though, I was still splitting apart inside. My new normal of solitary evenings felt jarringly foreign. I missed Samantha's laughter ringing through the house while we cooked dinner, missed her playful smile first thing in the morning, missed the partnership and camaraderie that held our relationship together for nearly a decade. But trust, once it's broken, it's impossible to repair it. Samantha fractured the very foundation of our marriage. Every time I looked at her now, all I saw was a brokenness. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I was craving a clean slate. Life in California was too entwined with memories of Samantha. I decided to relocate to Seattle, partly for a fresh start, but also for an exciting new job opportunity. Steve helped me load up a U-Haul with the belongings I wanted to keep. I took one last look at the place we once called home, said a bittersweet goodbye to the Pacific Ocean, and embarked on my next adventure. Settling into Seattle felt cathartic. I reveled in exploring a new city, finding favorite cafes and libraries to work from. Through a neighborhood listserv, I was introduced to a group of guys around my age who also worked in tech. We started getting together regularly for happy hours and camping trips. In this new chapter, I felt in control of my narrative. I was building a life centered around things I valued: career, community, and truth. My trust in others had been shattered, but I was slowly piecing it back together by being more selective about who I let in. A year and a half after leaving Samantha, my heart was starting to open itself to possibilities again. I met an intelligent, grounded woman at a friend's rooftop party. Over the next few months, we fell into an easy rhythm, taking weekend bike rides and cooking meals together. It was a stirring reminder that light can still emerge from darkness. Healing takes time, but the right people can illuminate your path back to hope. My wounds from Samantha's betrayal will always leave scars, but scars are nothing to be ashamed of. They are silent evidence that I survived. I made it through the fire and emerged on the other side, older and wiser. What Samantha did was an egregious violation of trust, but the blame rests squarely on her. I don't regret leaving everything behind for a shot at something better. Don't we all deserve to feel truly seen, known, and loved? I'm grateful that a friend cared enough to tell me the truth, even when it hurt. Her courage enabled me to take back control of my life. Now I can devote my energy to more meaningful pursuits and people. So here I am, embracing this new adventure in an unfamiliar place. I'm crafting a life centered around authenticity, second chances, and a world of possibilities. My past will always be a part of me, but it's time to start writing a new future. Well, in my opinion, I think Mandy opened the door to Samantha cheating, but her guilty conscience got the better of her, which I think was the right thing to do. Now, what I gather was Mandy and her husband seemed to be swingers. I might be wrong, but Samantha took the opportunity to label those outings with Mandy and her husband as girls' night, but I don't think he knew Randy was also attending these parties. A crazy story indeed.